Hello, I'm Dan Clark, and welcome to another in my series on board governance. I got a call recently from a director of an organization who was concerned about stonewalling, and it reminded me of one of my earliest consulting engagements. I got a call from the chairman of the board who said that the board was very frustrated with their executive. They felt like he was stonewalling them. The board was pushing for a merger, and their general manager, their ED, their CEO was constantly saying, "Oh yeah, I'll get to that, I'll get to that," but nothing ever materialized. And so the board, for a series of meetings, asked about this assignment, and the executive had nothing to say. So the chair of the board, calling me, said he'd like me to go in and light a fire under the executive, get things moving. And I pursued, before I wrote a proposal, I pursued the working relationship. What had the board said to the CEO in general about his or her duties? What was in place in the Code of Ethics and Conduct? What was the evaluation process for the executive? And the silence on the end of the phone was deafening. There wasn't any. So the project was twofold. The project was billed as a decision for the board to get a governance policy manual together where the CEO, the executive, would know crystal clear what he or she was supposed to do and what instructions would come from the board and what would happen if those instructions were not carried out. That project was a good one. It lasted for a while, a couple of weeks of one week of on-site working with the staff, working with management, and working with the board, and developing then another week or two to develop the written document. By the way, this is one of the two developments of policy that eventually became my board governance policy manual. That's a model available, a credit union version available on my website right now. Well, the current question came up. This director had been selected to the board because of a desire to have director diversity. There were a number of ways in which this individual did not match with the others on the board, and that's a good thing. But he's been on the board a year and still hasn't seen the bylaws. He's asked the chairman, he's asked the executive director, I'll get it to you, I'll get it to you. Well, how long does it take? Come on, people, how long does it take to go to the file and get the bylaws and make a copy of them? And why isn't that given to the director even before being elected to the board? Shouldn't somebody know what it is their job before they get appointed? Anyway, no, it's not acceptable that he can't get the bylaws. That's nuts. Unless worse come to worse, there aren't any. And of course, anytime I have a conversation or a coaching with a director or staff, there's always a lingering possibility that if you can't get things corrected, you're better to be off the board, off the staff, if your words, if your persuasion is not good enough to make things right, at least right for you. If your principles have to be bent in order for you to stay in the position, it's probably not worth it. But leadership means, and if you're an executive, if you're on the board, leadership means you try to fix things and make things better. The organization deserves that from you. One of the first things to remember is in most situations where it's a board asking management to get something done, is to sit and remind each other at a board meeting who works for who. Now, maybe a board's requirements or requests are wrong, and that's where an executive should stand up and point out the era. I know it's tough to supervise your own boss, but that may be what the case is. Who works for who? So if management can't get done what the board needs done, the board has a tough question in front of it. Look at the guidelines. Do some research. What have you already said about the relationship, about orientation training, about the documents each person is supposed to have available to them and to operate by? That's important. So before you go into confrontation, go find out what your organization has said, perhaps even long time said, perhaps hasn't said and needs to say, and that might be the way to break the logjam, is to realize, chairman of the board especially, your board hasn't told the management what their role is and how it compares to yours. Therefore, make a project. Decide to write governance policies. Then, throughout that process, whether it's a director or the executive who aren't getting done what they need to get done, they will see the handwriting on the wall. And they'll either change their behavior, or what I see often happening in these projects, the person realizes that what's coming down the pike will no longer meet their personal expectations and what they care about, and they will resign. And maybe that's the best thing. It's not the intent, but that may be the best thing. There's no reason to stonewall in today's organizations. If you can't get it done, say so. If you're going to get it done, give us a deadline. And then give us progress reports if it's a long enough project. But when the board wants information, and it can ask for anything, if it passes into micromanagement, management turnaround should say, what is it you need this for? It feels like you're going to micromanage with this information. And if a board can't come up with a logical, legal, reasonable reason for wanting that information, it probably shouldn't have it. And if you have an open, candid relationship between the two organizations, between the two parties in this organization, you probably will just settle on whatever makes sense. Management needs to do the same thing with staff. No stonewalling allowed. Hey, you've got a job to do. If the board can't give you what you need and your staff can't give you what you need, you have the power to correct it. If you have governance policies that give you HR power, you can correct the staff side. Go to the chairman and explain how you're being stonewalled by a director. These are all solvable issues. I've helped resolve some. You can too. Visit me on the web, danclark.com.